let's talk about how to change fractions, the decimals, the percents, and back again. So first, how do we change fractions to decimals? Well, anytime you have a fraction, you have the top part is called the numerator, the bottom part is called the denominator. And if you want to put it in your calculator, the easiest way is just to do the numerator divided by the denominator, or in other words, just do the top divided by the bottom. Super easy to put it in and get a decimal. If you want, though, you do usually have buttons on your calculator. So if you've already gotten a fraction as an answer and you want to change it to a decimal, depending on your calculator, you might have one that says A with like a B over C, or you might have a button that looks like an S and these fancy arrows to D. I'm not really sure why they did an S. Or if you have, I think, the TI-84s, you'll have a button that says Math. After you push that, you'll have another button pop up that has like a little triangle to decimals to say convert to decimal. So those are buttons you could look for on your calculator. Or you can just do top divided by bottom. So for our example, for 4/9, what's the numerator? What is the denominator? So our top, or the numerator, is 4. And the denominator is 9. And let's change it into a fraction. So to change it into a fraction, we'd have 4/9 is really just the same thing as 4 divided by 9. So I can just put it straight into my calculator like that. So I just type in 4 divided by 9, or if you want, you can use those buttons. But I just like to type it straight in, so I get 0.44444444, and it just keeps going. So for this remark, some fractions will have exact decimal equivalents, such as like 1/2 is just 0.5 and it just stops. But sometimes a fraction has a repeating and or possibly a non-terminating decimal. So like 1/3 is 0.333333, and we might just write 0.3 with a little line over it to say repeating, it just keeps going. Or 5/11 is 0.45454545, so we could write 0.45 with a line over the whole thing to say it keeps going. You might get something though like 1/17, which is 0.05882352491, etc. And this one has no pattern. It just keeps going. So for the next example, let's change each fraction to a decimal. Again, just use your calculator. So for 4/7, I will just type in 4 divided by 7, and I get 0.5714285714. Now, I would probably just go ahead and write 0.57 because I don't really want to write that whole thing out. Now, you might notice if you looked at it, 0.57145714, I think it was actually repeating. 0.57142, and then it started over again. So I could write it like that if I want. But you'll find this isn't an actual math class, this is a stats class, and so I'm not super picky about it. Okay, our next one is 13 divided by 10. So I just type in 13 divided by 10 and I get 1.3. Now let's do decimals to fractions. This one's slightly harder because you can't just type it in easily. You have to actually push some button on your calculator. So let's use our calculator to change each decimal into a fraction. On a TI-83 or 84, you'll use math and then frac. On a Casio FX115, you just type in the decimal, push enter, and then you can push the S to D button. On a TI-84, you type in the decimal, then push the second button, and then the F to D button. So let's go ahead and try some. So 0.0689, I put it in my calculator, 0.0689, push enter. Usually I have to push enter first just to get it in there registered, and I will push fractions to decimals, and I get 689 out of 10,000. For our next one of 0.75, when you put that in, you should get 3/4. Your calculator will usually simplify fractions for you. And 0.34 will be 17 out of 50. Now, remember we talked about on our decimals, some of them just stop, some have repeating decimals, and some don't seem to have any pattern at all. So those irrational numbers are those ones that have a decimal that goes on forever. You can't find a pattern, and so they can't actually really be written as a nice fraction. So example, like pi, we know pi is 3.14159, etc., and it just keeps going on forever. There is no way to write that as a nice clean fraction. Luckily, that won't really affect us in this class. Next is decimals to percents. Now, in this class, you will want to be able to make everything a decimal if asked. That's quite common. We work with decimals a lot, and we work with percents a lot. We don't really care about fractions too much. We mostly care about decimals and percents. So let's do decimals to percents and back again. Remember, percent means per 100. So 38% is written as 38 out of 100, or you could do 38 divided by 100, which is just 0.38. Or 435.6% is really 435.6 over 100. Or if you wrote it as a division, put in your calculator, you get 4.356. So if you have a percent and you want to go to a decimal, remember percent truly means per 100. So you just divide by 100. Now, anytime you divide by 100, that means you're just going to move your decimal 2 places to the left. So if we have 38%, that means just do 38 out of 100, and in your calculator will give you 0.38. Or you could say, well, here's my decimal right here, and I move it 2 places to the left, so 0.38. So that's how you can change it that way. If you want a decimal to a percent, you move the decimal 2 places to the right, or multiply by 100%. So if I had like 0.56 and I want to make it a percent, I would times it by 100% in my calculator, and I get 56%. Or I could just move the decimal. I could go 1, 2 places. So I get 56 because the decimal's right here now, which means we don't really need it anymore. This is probably the one part that you will have to remember in this class because our calculators don't always change back and forth easily. So you do have to know how to go between percents to decimals and back again. So in this next example, we have numbers as fractions, we want to write them as decimals, and also percents, and back again, and we're just going to try and do it all. So I have a fraction 5/10, and I want to make it a decimal. So I type it in my calculator, 5/10, or 5 divided by 10. So 5 divided by 10 gives me 0.5. Now that it's a decimal, it's easier to make it into percent. So to make a percent, you times by 100%, or move the decimal 2 places to the right, so that will give me 50%. 7/6, I do 7 divided by 6, so 1.16666. So if I want to make it a percentage, I do 1.16666, and I can write times 100%. That means I'll move my decimal 2 places, so it will be 116.666%. My next one starts as a decimal, so let's try and change it back to a fraction. So I'm just going to put it in my calculator. So I type 0.526, enter, push change to a fraction, and I get 263 out of 500. If I want to make it a percent, I just times it by 100%. Remember, when you go from a fraction, from a decimal to a percent, it should seem like it's getting bigger. So that's how you know you times by 100. Move it 2 places to the left, so that's 52.6%. 9.75 times 100%. Move it 2 places, that should give me 975%. If I want to make it into a fraction, again, I just put in my calculator, so I do 9.75, enter, push, change fraction, change to fraction, and it gives me 39 out of 4. Now we're starting all the way as a percent, and we want to go back. So to go from a percent to a decimal, you have to divide by 100. So 53.8 divided by 100%. Or you move it 2 places to the left to make it smaller. So this is going to be 0.538. 6.23% over 100%. That means you move your decimal 2 places to the left. So that's going to be 0.0623. And 0.068%, this is going to be really small because you divide that by 100 and you have to move your decimal 2 more places to the left. So that's 0.00068. If you did this on your calculator, you might have gotten 6.8 times 10 to the negative 4. Or it might have been written as 6.8 e negative 4. Those things all mean the same thing. It's that scientific notation again. We do have a video for that. It's not scheduled for a few more weeks, but you can go look at it now if you want. And to change these into fractions for each one again, I just put this straight into my calculator. So 0.538, push the button, and it gives me 269 out of 500. And 0.0623, push the button, is 623 out of 10,000. And 0.00068 gives me 17 out of 25,000. Let's look at our next example. So we wanted to use a calculator to find each number as a decimal and percent. Now remember our order of operations. You need to put parentheses around everything on the top. So 20, I would put this in my calculator as 20 times 35, parentheses, divided by 100. And this is going to give me 0.7. If I want to make that into a percent, I times it by 100 or move my decimal 2 places to the right. So this will be 70%. And so my next problem, I'd have 0.28 times 0.56. And I'd probably put parentheses around that. So I'd probably actually do 0.28 times 0.56 because that's faster, and put parentheses around all of it, divided by 523. This is going to give me 2.998 times 10 to the negative 4. Now I know we haven't done scientific notation yet, but we'd go move our decimal place 4 places. 1, 2, 3, 4, and put in 0. So you see that. So this is 0.00029998. And if you want to make that a percentage, you move your decimal, you times it by 100%, or move your decimal 2 places to the right to make it seem bigger. So it's 0.02998. Percent. So remember, if you want a percentage, it should be looking bigger, so you times it by 100. In our next example, I have 3 cats and 5 dogs. So I might ask you something like, what fraction are cats? Well, there are 3 out of a total of 8, so 3/8 are cats. What percentage are cats? Well, if I have 3/8, I would do 3 divided by 8, which putting that into my calculator gives me 0.375. But I want it as a percent, so let's times it by 100%, which means move the decimal 2 places to the right. So that's 37.5%. So that's how you get it as a percent. Now it might ask me what percent are dogs. Well, looking up at that, there are 5 out of 8 dogs. So this is, I type in first 5 divided by 8, which is 0.625. Then I have to make that a percentage by timesing it by 100%. Or I can move my decimal 2 places to the right, so 62.5%. Now you might notice something interesting here. What do I get if I do 37.5 plus 62.5? So if I add those two together, I get 100%. So anytime we talk about probability and chance, our total should always be 100%. So when talking about chance and probability, our total should always be 100%. Now, I know we haven't talked about chance and probability yet in this class, but this will come up and be handy. Because if you have 3/8 cats and 5/8 dogs, the total should be 1 or 100%.